And welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a great program lined up for you today. Our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, sorry about that, Sandra, is going to be speaking with Teclo Garcia, CEO of the Mission Economic Development Corporation. And he also sits on a variety of different committees, including the state's Border Trade Advisory Committee. So we're looking forward to this conversation in just a few moments. But first, let's get through the headlines making news across the border, starting with this one out of Chicago just a short time ago. There we go. Let me get that video. A short time ago, President Donald Trump said Chicago and New York could receive similar treatment from the federal government as Washington, D.C. has been getting. Now, you may remember that's where nearly 2,000 National Guard troops have been deployed to quell what the president's administration has characterized as an influx in dangerous crime. What you just saw a moment ago was National Guard troops from other states actually walking in front of the District of Columbia's National Guard Armory building. That's kind of headquarters to the D.C. National Guard. Despite calling Chicago the nation's greatest city, Trump criticized Democratic Mayor Brandon Johnson's leadership, saying, quote, "When we're ready, we'll go in and straighten out Chicago just like we did D.C., end quote. Trump said that in the Oval Office. By accusing D.C. police of falsifying crime data and threatening the mayor with a total federal takeover, he's sought to muscle the city's leadership into submission, which is illustrating how the president might engage with other American cities that he deems too dangerous. Trump also suggested New York could also get the similar treatment down the line. Now it's time to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce today's guest.
Thanks, Rudy. Great to be here. We have with you Teclo Garcia. He heads the Mission Economic Development Corporation, also sits on the state's Border Trade Advisory Committee. Teclo was a journalist for years, worked in Laredo with economic development, very, very knowledgeable when it comes to cross-border trade, finance. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Sandra, Rudy, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm glad you're doing this show.
Awesome. Now, August 12th, the Border Trade Advisory Committee met in Austin. Tell me, what were some of the big talking points, and did you come up with any solution? What were the big headlines out of that meeting?
Yeah, just to provide you and your listeners a little bit of context, the Border Trade Advisory Committee is formed by public and private sector individuals from around the state and headed by the Texas State Secretary of State. And also operated by TxDOT. So there's a lot of folks involved in this. And in this particular meeting, there's always updates from around the border areas and Mexico. And by the way, Mexican officials, usually leaders from the border states that face Texas, Chihuahua, Tamaulipas, et cetera, are also involved in these meetings. This particular one, there was, again, updates from up and down the border, but one particular aspect was very important to this meeting, and that was the update on the Texas-Mexico Border Transportation Master Plan. This was done before, back in 2019, 2020. There was a master plan that was rolled out, and what the plan really does is prioritize the needs of the transportation needs of the border based on the input from local leaders, local political leaders, infrastructure folks, city managers, county judges, and the like, all the stakeholders that you can really think of. But that's been 5 years now, and TxDOT thinks that there needs to be an update or a new border master plan rolled out. And so this past meeting was the announcement and the basics of the beginning of the new rollout. One big difference in the new plan, given the old one, besides just the natural updates that would take place and needs change and traffic patterns change, is that there was only 3 border master plan stakeholder groups the last time. It was the Valley, the Laredo, Eagle Pass, the Rio area, and El Paso. This time there'll be 5 groups, and they want to get more micro into the needs assessments. And so you'll have the Cameron County area, you'll have the McAllen area, you'll have Laredo, and you'll have El Paso and Sandra. Even Presidio would get
Wow.
a group
So, so
together.
these are,
So
and these are roads, just to clarify, that are on the U.S. side. We're not talking international bridges. We're not talking connectors. We're talking actual infrastructure roads on the U.S. side, correct?
we're talking both.
Okay.
So
So bridge expansions
uh,
too.
as you know, bridge expansions are approved at a federal level.
Right.
However, TxDOT is very keen to work with those who are getting expansions to figure out how they're going to interconnect with or have connectivity with Texas roads, and Mexico the same. So what happens is, even before cities or private owners of bridges are going to ask, say, for another crossing in Washington, TxDOT and the BTAC, who's what the Border Trade Advisory Committee is called, are interested in what people are proposing. So we can work together to do this beforehand, instead of getting a permit for one area and then figure out how to scramble to connect that bridge. So we're trying to work ahead of time with all entities and all the stakeholders to make sure we're working in unison, and that goes with Mexico as well.
And there has been a lot of movement with the presidential permits. Just earlier, very recently, a new pedestrian crossing at the Gateway International Bridge in Brownsville was approved. Now, 3 counties, not including Hidalgo County where Mission is, but 3 counties in South Texas have this fast track bridge permitting process: Maverick, Webb, and Cameron. You mentioned Cameron includes Brownsville for those listeners and watchers that will connect to Matamoros, Mexico. And this new pedestrian bridge was just approved. And what it allows is the plans to go forward, the construction to go forward, while the environmental NEPA process is happening. If there's any concerns, and they're supposed to halt the construction, but you don't have to wait for the NEPA approval, which can take years. So I got to ask you, because Hidalgo County is not included in that. Is there a push to add more counties to that? And how do you feel like the expansion of the Ansel Duas Bridge is going? I mean, do you want to see more bridges in Hidalgo County that can help the Mission area?
I had a State Department official tell me many years ago that there was too many applications for new bridges, and he said it was his job to say no.
Okay. Okay.
But I think generally, I think it's a feeling, and I'm on different other committees like the Border Trade Alliance and NASCO and the Alliance for I-69. There's always a case to be made for capacity at the bridges. And often the State Department used to, although the bridge approvals are not in their hands anymore, is to, when requests come in for new crossing points, they look around the area at capacity. And if there's a bridge nearby that is is a high capacity that can handle a lot more, they would tend to not approve the new requests, right? But I think that stakeholders, cities, counties, bridge owners along the Texas border with Mexico have gotten much smarter about their requests, and they're much more strategic. And these requests are not just because they want another bridge, because the private sector is demanding it. Trade is demanding new crossings, and so when we look at those, in our committees or the groups I belong to, we generally favor those to have more crossings. But that's not always the case. But still, I think more than not, we would like to see more crossings. You can see the congestion in Laredo. North America's busiest port does $80 billion more in trade than the Port of Houston. El Paso, Cameron County. There's always, we believe, a need for more crossings to help facilitate more trade. I mean, more trade is really lifting all boats around this area, not just us, but all of Texas, Houston, DFW, Austin, even up into the Panhandle. These are crossing points, not just for the local economies and local cities, but for the state and national economy. I had so many folks I've spoken to, especially in Laredo, who are crossing to get to Memphis, which is the headquarters for FedEx and a distribution point, or to Atlanta or other places. These bridges are of national importance. They're not just local crossing points. So if you put your your view on those projects from a national point of view. They're extremely important. And as I was telling the Texas Secretary of State, Jay Nelson, just a few days ago, that every dollar that gets invested in crossing points and bridges and infrastructure connecting those bridges to highways and interstates in Texas, those are investments for the entire state of Texas. And so, yes, they're extremely important. Regarding Ansel Duas,
yeah, I wanted to talk
ahead.
about the Ansel Duas International Bridge, the expansion. Tell us what's happening as far as getting trucks loaded, not just empties, right, eventually to cross. And also, the governor of San Luis Potosí came last year, and then he came and he pledged that all the trucks would come through this bridge. So tell us, what's this expansion going to be ultimately?
Yeah. First of all, the update. Myself and the city manager here in Mission, we spoke to the federal officials, and they tell us they're in the 90 percentile in terms of completion of the inspection facilities. However, they are waiting for machinery that they sophisticated machines, for inspections and non-intrusive inspections. And then there's going to be need for training once those machines get into the port.
With the
So
U.S.
that's
Customs
really
and Border
why.
Protection. Okay.
That is correct. And then if you think about whatever we're doing on this side, Mexico is doing on that side. So then there's that also to take into consideration when we're talking about dates. But they feel strongly about the spring of 2026 having an opening date for us to do us at that time.
And tell us, how many lanes will it be, and what will the capabilities be?
I don't have the lane number for you. I would be inaccurate to tell you how many. Of course, the bridge still has 2 lanes coming this way, and then it expands to. It seems like I'll just guess. Seems like 8 or 10 lanes for truck traffic. It will not be a produce bridge. The produce trucks will still be going through FAR. This will be non-produce, non-cold storage bridge.
But they'll be loaded,
good.
right? They'll be commercial vehicles that are loaded, not just empties.
Right.
That's the important part.
Right now it's just empties, but no, they'll be fully loaded, and that's why they need all the machinery and personnel training and all that for the before the bridge opens.
And then going with it is this big industrial park that's also being built right nearby, which benefits Mission as well.
Yes, there's a big developer that owns a lot of the land, which is Kilman Development, and we're working hand in hand with them as we get closer to the truck, the cargo date. And so there's been some development that's happened there, and they've sold many of their tracks nearest the bridge. We're working with other developers in that area also to try to develop warehousing and other things. Once you see a couple go up, I think that'll really open the floodgates to a lot of other development. Similar in FAR. FAR has some big developments happening right now, and really has expanded by leaps and bounds once those first few came in. And FAR is doing a good job with their bridge as well, and they're getting an expanded bridge.
We're going to continue our conversation with Teclo Garcia, CEO of the Mission Economic Development Corporation and a sitting member on the Border Trade Advisory Committee for the state of Texas. Stay with us, Teclo, and stay with us at home. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, host here in Harlingen, Texas. And we're going to continue our conversation now with South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez and CEO of the Mission Economic Development Corporation, Teclo Garcia.
Teclo, I wanted to ask you about the tariffs. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of flip-flopping tariffs with Mexico. Right now it's 25%. But here in the Rio Grande Valley, a lot of the maquiladoras that produce auto parts south of the border, the cars are assembled. Tell me, how is this affecting the maquiladora industry in this region, or is it?
Well, it looks, at least early on, I mean, it is early into the game, and maybe some of the impacts we've not been able to see that on a full term yet. But we know initially at the announcement of the tariffs, of the tariffs, there's been a slowdown in truck crossings, go back and forth in FAR and here in Ansel Duas, and in some of the other crossing points between here and El Paso. Now, those while traffic has been reduced, it's still not anywhere near low levels that we've seen, in the past. So, and some of that, even in the first 6 months of the year, in January, the truck traffic took a big dive in February as well, at least around here. But we've seen a stabilization of the cargo along the far and Anzaduas bridges, and that's because Mexico has been given some reprieves by the White House on the tariffs, and so that's kind of been materialized in the truck crossing numbers. But I think most of all in the folks that I've spoken to is that in production here and in Mexico is that they're looking for certainty. Certainly no one wants to see high tariffs, but if there's going to be tariffs, and if that's a certainty, then they would rather see that and lock in those rates and be able to operate and create budgets and forecasts based on what is seen. What's not really being welcomed is the topsy-turvy, yes, no, 60 days, no 30 days.
Right.
They will address it later, and that has played havoc with a lot of people's numbers, and that's not really been enjoyed by the manufacturers on both sides.
The flip-flopping has made it really hard for long-term planning.
It has.
And job growth. Now, the way I understand it, currently Mexico's auto exports are subject to 25% tariff, but if the exports U.S. content is over 40%, then the 25% tariff does not apply to the portion of it. I guess all of this is kind of still being negotiated with Sheinbaum and with President Trump. We're in a 90-day pause now. What would be the best outcome that you would hope that they would agree to?
Well, the best outcome would be that there wouldn't be any additional tariffs. I mean, of course, I'm not sure that's going to happen. And if the president and the White House and Congress feel like this is the route to go in terms of the tariffs, well, then let the number be what it may be. I think that what we really want is some expectations that are solid and long term. There's talk about aluminum and steel and tomatoes and all kind of things, right? And so we hope those would iron themselves out. In the trade groups that I belong to, there's a lot of chatter, a lot of discussion in our chat rooms between folks, how they might get hurt by it and how many drivers they might lose or trucks that are going to be, inoperable. But I think that I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think people are looking for stabilization, and a lower rate would be better. If a rate has to come in, and that's what the White House thinks is fair, then yeah, I mean, if it's 20% or 10%, but really let's just try to figure out what it is. It is a complicated situation. I want to emphasize that I went to a meeting last year in Mexico City where there was a 3-day conference between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico on aluminum. Can you imagine, Sandra, me and you sitting in a room talking about aluminum for three days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Well, yeah, it gets very tricky, and you have to use your best diplomacy and strategy to try to figure these things out.
I wanted to ask you, drivers, some other policies that have been implemented are, for instance, requiring that Mexican truckers have English proficiency. And, some people can say, well, that ensures that they're safe on the U.S. roads, that they can read the signs. But has that affected any of the truck traffic, any of the bridge traffic that you've noticed?
Some folks might be able to differ from what I say. I've not seen that. I'm not on the ground every day with logistics and transportation companies. But there's always been, as you know, Sandra, covering this over the years, this sort of schism between, U.S. and Mexico about having Mexican drivers deep in the U.S. And, of course, that's really never materialized anyway. So I'm not sure what the big hubbub is about that.
What about, switching
the vast
gears,
majority, yeah, go ahead.
Switching gears, I wanted to ask you, we have a few minutes left. the ICE raids, U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement. There'd been a lot of talk, and recently there was a roundtable held here in the Rio Grande Valley with the McAllen mayor and other economic leaders saying, we need to come to an agreement because agriculture, farm workers are afraid to come to work. We're losing workers. They're afraid to show up for their jobs. Is this affecting industry down here? What are you seeing?
I can say that on a case-by-case basis, we see some impact. I was just talking to a business owner today, just before I came to this interview, who is opening up a new business, retail business in Edinburgh, and talked about the difficulty of getting regular labor like he was used to because of the fear of getting of the ICE raids. And I've heard this multiple times. I talked to a developer probably about a month ago who told me the same thing here in Mission, that the regular crews aren't showing up because of the fear of the ICE raids.
So
I think you're right, Sandra. I think and I think that it's out there. That has impacted the way labor works, and there should be an agreement, whether it's farm workers and our good friends at Texas International Produce Association just had a meeting in here yesterday in our seed building here in Mission with maybe 30 to 50 area farmers talking about how they could address the visa situation, right? And have worker visas. And of course, there's been some legislation introduced in Washington about this. So yes, the answer is we need to move on that to try to solve these worker issues that we have, especially along the border, because people for centuries have been more than 100 years have been used to crossing back and forth to work, and it's a production issue in the U.S. Right? It's a labor and income issue on the Mexican side. So we do need to work harder to figure it out.
Let's go back to that retailer that you mentioned. What kind of business was it? Retail? What kind of business were we talking? A restaurant?
Oh, it's a restaurant.
Okay, okay. And what do you say to somebody like that? What do you say to someone like that when they tell you they can't get the workers? I mean, do you encourage them? Do you lay it out there? What do you say to someone like that?
Yeah, that's really difficult for me to say anything to them of consequence, because they're the risk taker here. They're the investor. They're putting the money into the ground. And so they still have been able to make it happen, but it's been more difficult for them to the ways they were used to. In these conversations, I tend to be the listener, because they're telling me, and then I should be the one that's working with our elected leaders and our associations to try to get them answers.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, but that's all the time we have, Mr. Garcia. Teclo Garcia, CEO for the Mission Economic Development Corporation. He also sits on the state's Border Trade Advisory Committee. We really appreciate you for joining us and having this enlightening conversation with us for our viewers.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you, Rudy, and thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
All right. Well, stay with us, because Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this episode of Border Report Live. Just a reminder, and a big thank you to Teclo Garcia from the Mission EDC for coming on to talk to us on the program today about a whole host of topics. If you're just tuning in and you missed that, well, you can catch previous episodes of Border Report Live on borderreport.com. And we're also available to take on the road with you. And by that, I mean we are also in podcast form. You can stay up to date on all things shaping the U.S.-Mexican border from Border Report Live podcast, the podcast edition of this. And you can get that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as the iHeartRadio app, and hopefully YouTube soon to come as well. We'll tell you more about that in another time. Before we go, we wanted to show you this video because a tenant who sued the city of Portland, Oregon, claiming what you're seeing here caused her some problems. She says police have a responsibility to control the ongoing noise at the Immigration and Customs Enforcement protests, and she just lost her case. A judge actually ruled that the Portland Police Bureau is not obligated to enforce those complaints from protests, noise complaints rather, from protests outside a federal ICE facility in South Portland, according to a new court ruling. Now, for more than 2 months, protests have taken place outside the ICE facility, often resulting in property destruction, like graffiti and federal agents deploying flashbangs and tear gas. And before we go, we wanted to remind you to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a show every week that tracks the movers, shakers, and rule makers in American politics. Nextstar's Director of Political Content, Chris Berg, and Director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball, break down who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on data. This week, it's all about the statewide Ohio races coming up, U.S. Senate, the governor's race. You know how important those two races are when it comes to all things in the country. So make sure to check it out. You can find more on Political Power Ranker at abc27.com or your local Nexstar station's website. Thank you so much for watching. For Sandra Sanchez, our South Texas correspondent, my name is Rudy Mireles, coming to you from Harlingen, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. See you next time.